The hardest part was never the constant calls, it was the morning they stopped. Elias sat quietly by the window, his fingers loosely wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The room felt unusually still, almost unfamiliar in its silence. For years, mornings had never been this quiet. There was always something, a message, a call, a small request waiting for him before the day even began. Someone always needed him, and somehow he had always been ready. Elias was not the kind of person who demanded attention. He didn't try to stand out or make himself known in a crowd. But if anyone ever needed help, he was always the first name that came to mind. "Just call Elias," people would say. "He'll handle it." And they were right. He always did. At first it felt good. There was something comforting about being needed, about knowing that your presence mattered in someone else's life. Every "thank you" felt like quiet proof that he was doing something right, that he was enough in ways he didn't always feel on his own. It gave him a sense of purpose, a place in the lives of others. But over time that feeling began to shift. The calls didn't slow down. They grew. What started as occasional help turned into constant expectation. A neighbor needed assistance fixing something small. A coworker asked him to stay late just this once. A friend needed someone to listen again and again and again. And each time Elias said yes. Not once. Not twice. But every single time. Even when he was tired. Even when he had plans of his own. Even when, deep down, he quietly wished someone would pause and ask him a simple question. "Are you okay?" But no one ever did. And maybe it wasn't entirely their fault. Elias had never given them a reason to ask. There was something about him, something calm, something steady, that made people believe he didn't need anything. That he was always fine. Always available. Always strong. But that was the biggest misunderstanding of all. Because Elias did need something. He just didn't know how to ask for it. Or maybe he was afraid to. Afraid that if he stopped being useful, he would stop being important. So he kept going. Days turned into weeks, and weeks quietly slipped into months. Somewhere along the way, Elias stopped noticing himself. He moved through life responding to others, adjusting to their needs, shaping his time around their expectations. And the more he gave, the less of himself seemed to remain. There was a part of him he hadn't visited in a long time, a quieter part, a softer part. The part that used to sit by the window with a pencil in hand, sketching small, simple moments of life. A cup of tea resting on a table. A street glowing after rain. A stranger lost in thought. Nothing grand. Nothing extraordinary. Just life as it was. He used to love that. There was a time he imagined doing something more with it. Not for attention, not for recognition, but simply because it made him feel alive. It gave him a sense of connection, not to others but to himself. But slowly that part of him faded. Not because he stopped caring, but because there was always something else waiting. Someone else who needed him more urgently than his own quiet dreams. Later, he would tell himself, "I'll come back to it later." But later never seemed to arrive. And the strange part was, he didn't question it. Because every time he helped someone, they smiled. They thanked him. They appreciated him. And in those brief moments he felt seen. But only for a second. Because the moment always passed and another request took its place. Until helping others was no longer something he chose to do. It became who he was. And once that happens, it becomes difficult to stop. Because stopping forces you to face a question you've been avoiding for a long time. If no one needs me, who am I? One day something small happened. So small it almost didn't seem important. But it changed everything. Elias woke up like any other morning. The same quiet room, the same soft light slipping through the window, the same routine he had followed for years. Nothing looked different, yet something felt unfamiliar. His phone didn't ring. There were no messages waiting for him, no missed calls, no one asking for anything. At first he didn't think much of it. Maybe people were busy. Maybe they didn't need help today. But as the hours passed, the silence began to stretch, becoming heavier with each moment. He checked his phone again. Still nothing. For the first time in a long time, no one needed him. And strangely, that hurt more than exhaustion ever had. Because without the calls, without the requests, without the constant need, Elias didn't know what to do with himself. He sat in the same chair, staring at the same window, holding on to a quiet he had spent years avoiding. And slowly, a question began to form in his mind. If no one needs me, what do I do now? The realization didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, like something that had always been there, waiting patiently beneath the surface. He had built his life around being needed. Not around what he loved, not around who he was, but around what others expected from him. And now that it was gone, he felt empty. Not because people had left, but because he had never stayed for himself. That truth didn't come with anger. It came with something heavier, clarity. And clarity has a way of unsettling you because once you see it, you can't pretend it isn't there anymore. Later that afternoon, his phone finally lit up. A message. Simple. Familiar. Hey, can you help me with something? Elias stared at it longer than usual. In the past, he wouldn't have hesitated. His answer would have come instantly, almost automatically. But this time something held him back. His fingers hovered over the screen, his chest tightening as an unfamiliar feeling settled in. For the first time he asked himself a different question. Do I actually want to do this, or am I just afraid to say no? The answer came quietly, but it was clear. He didn't want to. Not because he didn't care. Not because he had suddenly become a different person. But because, for once, he wanted to choose himself. So he typed slowly, carefully, as if each word carried weight. I can't today. He read it again. It felt strange. Almost uncomfortable. Like stepping into unfamiliar territory. But beneath that discomfort there was something else. Something steady and real. It was honest. He pressed send. For a moment nothing happened. No reply. No reaction. No confrontation. Just silence. But this time it felt different. It didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. Not perfect, not complete, but peaceful in a way he hadn't experienced before. That evening, Elias sat by the window again. The same place, the same chair, the same quiet. But the silence no longer pressed against him the way it used to. It felt softer now, like something he could finally sit with instead of run from. He reached for a pencil. It felt unfamiliar at first, like reconnecting with a part of himself he had left behind. He opened his old sketchbook, flipping through pages that had remained untouched for far too long. Blank spaces waited for him, quietly, patiently. And slowly he began to draw. Not for anyone else. Not for approval. Not to prove anything. Just because he wanted to. The lines were simple, imperfect, and honest. But with every stroke, something returned. Not confidence, not success, but something quieter. Himself. Days passed, and Elias didn't stop helping people entirely. He just stopped helping at the cost of himself. Some people noticed the change. Some didn't understand. Some drifted away. And yes, that hurt. But what he gained in return was something he had never truly allowed himself before. Space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to exist without constantly responding to someone else's needs. And in that space he began to rediscover things he had forgotten. Small details, quiet moments, the simple feeling of being present in his own life. One afternoon something unexpected happened. An elderly neighbor noticed the drawings resting near his window and asked if she could take a look. She turned each page slowly, carefully, as if each drawing held something worth understanding. When she looked up, she smiled, not out of politeness, not out of habit, but with genuine appreciation. These should be seen, she said. It was such a simple sentence, but it landed differently than all the others he had heard before. Because this time he wasn't being valued for what he could do. He was being seen for who he was. Weeks later, a few of his drawings found their way onto the wall of a small neighborhood cafe. Nothing grand, nothing announced. Just quiet frames holding ordinary moments of life. People paused to look at them. Some smiled. Some stayed a little longer than expected. Elias stood quietly in the corner, hands in his pockets, watching without needing to be noticed. And in that moment he realized something he had been missing all along. Not attention. Not validation. Presence. A life that belonged to him before it belonged to everyone else. Because being kind was never the problem. Losing yourself in it was. You can care about others without abandoning yourself. You can be there for people without disappearing. And the people who truly value you will never require you to become less of yourself just to stay close. Elias finally understood something that had taken him years to learn. He didn't have to be needed to be valuable. And sometimes, the most important person you need to show up for is you. Thank you for watching. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to reflect on it, because sometimes, the smallest lessons can change everything. For more powerful, life-changing stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment. Stay inspired, and take care of yourself.